So thank you for joining me for our Software Audit Compliance Workshop. I'm Paul Empringham from Team EDA. So just to run through the agenda, I'm going to introduce myself and the company. We're going to talk about my definition of engineering software. We're going to look at an overview on audits. We're going to talk a bit about managing risk, and we're going to finish up really with a demonstration about how our software LAMM addresses this audit for defence. So information on me, I'm Paul Empringham. I'm the Team EDA European Sales Director. I started off my career as a mechanical design engineer for Marconi, but quite quickly moved into some work with Siemens PLM. So I was a business consultant. I spent just over 5 years traveling the UK and America and some of Europe as well, training, consulting on CAD and PLM software, so mostly NX and Teamcenter. That took me into some management roles in a number of customers in the UK, so a big electronics firm and a big defence firm as well, where I managed teams who looked after the CAD and PLM systems, kind of process improvement for each of those companies. Very enjoyable work. More recently, I worked as the VP of Research for a PLM and digital twin media company. So we held conferences in a number of different areas. I actually developed a maritime digital transformation conference as well. But you can see me here. That's me presenting as chairman of the conferences. And down the bottom, you can see I'm hosting a number of senior executives, basically from each of the big kind of PLM vendors. We're looking at Dassault, SAP, Siemens, and so on. Really enjoyable work, but that kind of sums up my 22 years across CAD and PLM. But now I really like this product at Team EDA, hence joining the team, and I've been here for just over a year. So a bit about Team EDA. We are a small company based just north of Manchester, just north of Boston, in Manchester, New Hampshire, I should say, in the USA. So we are a veteran-owned company, and we have a sales team spaced across the world. Plus, we also have our in-house development team. We run a DevOps organization, so our developers are also our support team. And we are very lucky here, as you can see on screen, to have a number of wonderful customers that space across the entire different verticals within the industry, kind of industrial, manufacturing and engineering. So not only kind of architecture and engineering, lots of aerospace and defense, automotive, but all the way through to healthcare as well. They keep us constantly busy with more enhancements to our products, and we like to get some lots of enhancements out every year. The product is LAMM. It stands for License Asset Management with Usage Monitoring. And as I've got here, it's a comprehensive solution for license management. So not only is it a SAM tool, which allows us to store a lot of information, as you'd expect, about the assets, we also have a full usage monitoring suite as well. So this is primarily for FlexLM style floating network tools, but we have, and we'll look at this later, lots of historical reports, a ton of warnings, alerts, batch reports. But really what we're looking at here is this kind of holistic view of your license estate that gives you enough information for decision making for license negotiations and renewals. We want to make sure that you're right-sized. You're not paying too much and you haven't got too few licenses. You have got the absolute correct amount of licenses for your year. When we talk about engineering licenses, I suspect you're familiar with these, but what we're talking about here is the typical high-value tools such as CAD, CACs, so that's computer-aided manufacture, computer-aided engineering, Simulation tools, in that we're talking about FEA, CFD, a lot of multi-physics domain tools there. EDA, so that's maybe ECAD, kind of layout design, PCBs. Mathematics type tools, PLM, product lifecycle management, maybe model-based system engineering. And the names that will be familiar to you. So on the top left here, we're looking at EDA tools. Bottom left, some of the computer-aided design tools which are familiar out there. Top right, some of the stress analysis tools, simulation tool sets. And again, bottom right, we're talking about the mathematics tools. But you'll be aware that there are literally hundreds of other products out there. I haven't even begun to list some of the architecture and engineering tools, such as ArcGIS and many of the Autodesk family of tool sets. Moving on to audits then. What are the main reasons for audits? So audits come about primarily for a couple of different reasons. And we often see this, it's a suspected use of pirated software. And secondly, it's really looking at the non-compliance of the software versus what companies have contracted, what they've purchased. Now, these can come about for a number of different reasons, but ultimately they're driven by revenue generation for the software vendor. For them, obviously, they're losing money if there's pirated software out there. And non-compliance, there's a lot of companies out there that can get into non-compliant situations by mistake, or obviously several out there who are doing it on purpose as well. But again, it's a loss of revenue to these software firms. They spend billions developing the software, so it needs to be addressed. Now, the software piracy audit, how do they tend to originate? Well, it's probably no surprise to know that typically these come in via some kind of whistleblower or disgruntled ex-employees. And I should note at this point that software audits like this can come in via two different routes. They could come from the software vendor. So if you use CATIA or Inovia, it could come in via Dassault Systèmes as they are the vendor. But most of these big engineering software companies use or are members of the Business Software Alliance, and they can also launch an audit as well. So lots of audits come from two different routes. So yes, whistleblowers. These are the people that know something about the company, so they might know that they're using pirated or kind of cracked licenses, as we talk about. They might understand that the software has been over-installed on multiple workstations, so past what it's contracted to do. Could be in different geographical areas and so on. There have been cases where these maybe the vendors or third parties have actually used some social media. You could find the LinkedIn profiles. Autodesk might understand that they have a customer who uses AutoCAD, but actually through LinkedIn profiles or CV databases, a number of the employees there are talking about their use of Revit or some of the other tool sets they have. It's very easy for these software firms to kind of go back through their records and work out that, well, actually, hold on, they've got at least 20 engineers talking about using Revit on a daily basis, but actually there's no record from the software vendor that they've ever purchased that software. Now, yeah, the vendors can ask for a voluntary software audit, but ultimately, within the terms and conditions of most contracts, there is a legal right as well for the end user companies to actually be able to run the audit as well. So if it's a software piracy audit and a vendor or the BSA comes to you asking for a voluntary software audit, this can pretty quickly come into a targeted investigation if they have some form of information that comes from these kind of social media profiles or kind of an ex-employee. A non-compliance audit's slightly different then. These can come from a slightly different route. Possibly there's some information that the company has found that you've exceeded the scope of your end user license agreement. So this could be the student or home use has been used for commercial work. I've certainly seen that in the past. Working for Siemens, lots of the files, the CAD files created via the student route are actually marked in some way that they're from that piece of software. And when you try and upload that into a commercial software or into a commercial Teamcenter PLM use, there's warning messages that tell you about this. And that's typically how these vendors are alerted to that. The vendors also have reporting technology within their software. So they have these kind of phone home mechanisms where it's maybe constantly reporting that it's in use. Some of them are a bit more advanced in that they can actually report how many installs actually exist on the network. But also, software might be used in different geographic zones. So possibly with this home phone mechanism that it's pinging different IP addresses. If a company only has bought a contract for software for use in America, and then suddenly you start seeing these IP pings coming from a company in Malaysia, let's say, then that's what really prompts these audits. So when you get through and have these audit letters, well, let's look at a bit of kind of do's and don't do's. The first thing really is don't ignore the letters. That would be the worst thing you can do. It's an audit letter, it's starting a legal process, you need to respond to it promptly. What you shouldn't do is panic. We'll talk about many of the kind of the ways of mitigating things, but the last thing you should do is panic and start a hunt internally for a whistleblower of some kind. That there's really a kind of a prescribed process to go through, and I'd recommend you go and get the correct advice. But wasting time looking for a whistleblower is the wrong thing when you should actually be trying to get ahead of the game and start looking at get your internal house in order. Don't try and negotiate with the vendor immediately. You are immediately alerting them to the fact that you won't be compliant in some way. Trying to negotiate at this stage might not close out any legal proceedings. So it's best to go through, stay cool, calm, and collected, and start running through a process. Don't uninstall non-compliant software. Ultimately, when an audit does take place through a third party, they're clever to this, and they understand that they uninstalling any software leaves a trace, and it's very likely that they're going to find the fact that you've uninstalled software. And likewise, don't rush to go and buy more licenses, even through some other route. The software vendors or the BSA are going to find that out as well. And by doing so, uninstalling and rushing to buy more software, you are basically declaring that you've infringed upon your contract. So let's talk about things that you should do. I'd highly recommend that you talk to a legal specialist in this area. There are lots of specialists out there who deal with audit defense for engineering software and for all software types. That's not a service that we provide, so I'm not going to give you advice about that. But you do want to make sure that you've got your confidentiality agreements in place. There can be nothing worse than information getting out there that your company has used illegal software. So you need to get confidentiality agreements in place. Although I said you wouldn't really want to be doing a witch hunt to find a whistleblower, you may want to consider where the alert has come from, where this audit request has come from. Is it an aggrieved employee? Do you think it's someone in-house? Possibly you've got somebody from an IT team or an engineering team who has recently left the company. possibly the route has come down there. But the vendors and the BSA will guard and look after the confidentiality of their informant, very much so. So you will never find out who it is. But if you have somebody who has left recently, you could start to think about, well, okay, if it was them, what access did they have? Did they install any software? There have been cases where aggrieved employees have actually installed a load of illegal software kind of a week or two before they've left the company, and then whistleblown when they've left. In those situations, legally, they can be defended because that's an aggrieved employee and the company wasn't necessarily aware of it or didn't have the procedures in place. So that's kind of some special cases there. You'll want to start looking at all the receipts, the POs. Hopefully you've got some kind of SAM tool, but really it's getting that bigger picture of the evidence. Unfortunately, receipts and purchase orders do get lost. We've certainly heard of cases where lots of mergers and acquisitions, one company's been taken across to another, a difficult decisions is made as to what to keep and what to lose. And there are lots of companies out there who simply do not have the purchase order or receipt evidence to having bought some software. And that's fine. It's not illegal. The vendor should obviously have that information. But the best thing to do is to keep that. Then you're going to want to run some kind of internal audit as well. You just want to analyze the risk in your exposure. So you're going to want to collect together the license files, serial numbers, what the installations are, what type of software, where is it, the computer names, everything you think that you'd expect within a software audit from a vendor. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the risks then. So we're talking about legal risks, financial risks, and operational risks. So from a legal risk point of view, how have these come about? Well, as you know, that the software vendors, they have pages and pages of legal documents, and certainly within them, they have, depending on the vendor, they have certain restrictions. You might find that you have something, a WAN versus a LAN license, so a wide area network versus a local area network. Certainly, I know from a Siemens perspective, when you buy a Siemens NX license, that is a in-country use of a license. But if you wanted to use it using like a follow the sun, so several companies I know of upgrade those licenses to be WAN licenses or kind of global licenses that allows that same license to be utilized after the UK have gone to sleep. It can be utilized in America, and then when they go to sleep, it could be used in Asia. So these kind of follow the sun licensing networks. Now, there's a lot that could be assumed that you could simply do that, but contractually, you're not. Also, what are the restrictions around whether a license server goes down? Could you simply deflect some of your licenses that aren't being used in the UK? Could you push those over the internal network to India? Well, it's easy to do technically, but contractually, you're probably breaking the rules. Other areas then, not uninstalling license servers following a server move. You might have signed to say that you've moved a server from one place to the next. For whatever reason, the license admin hasn't stopped that. Maybe the old license server is running, so you're basically running duplicate license servers. Another big one is running generic users. So if you've got a named user scheme, this is where you call somebody Joe Blogs or admin, and it allows a number of users to log in under that. Test environments, you need to have a good look at your contract as well. Are you allowed to run your test environments? Duplicating. So you might find that a user runs up a CAD system twice, once to do some testing and once to use in the production. I've certainly had a case in the past where we've had a number of users, some CAM users, where It was actually a vendor consultant had turned on some undocumented features, so via some environment variables, so they're able to do some more kind of development code level stuff. But when we came to upgrade, we found that that was a licensed feature, and we had a bit of a strange situation where obviously we had to buy new licenses, but we didn't realize it was a paid for feature. And obviously, from a legal point of view, using pirated or unauthorized software is going to put you legally in a difficult place as well. Financial risks. So equally, if you aren't if you haven't got an accurate budget, so you're not able to track all your licenses or have a good strategy of your licenses, then you're going to have unexpected purchases, and that's primarily due to poor forecasts. It's happened, I'm sure, in every company you've been in. Suddenly somebody comes and bangs on the table and says, right, okay, we need more licenses. We're getting all these denials. Right, we need to buy another 10 set of licenses. And, from a budgeting perspective, you've got the finance team saying, well, hold on, how come we didn't know about this? I've also seen several situations where part of the business has taken on more engineers, a big recruitment drive. Right, yeah, we've taken on 10 more engineers, but they haven't discussed with the CAD management team the fact that they're expanding. They haven't forecast that, so the licenses were already kind of out of sync. There's also a financial risk around the over expenditure on licenses as well. Underutilization of software is incredibly common, and this is really the sweet spot that we find when we talk to customers out there. There's an awful lot of customers out there who, over the years, through maybe merger acquisition, or having CAD software for a long time, or maybe multiple software versions, but actually for the same purpose. So you might have several kind of FEA, stress analysis pieces of software. But underutilizing software is costing the company a tremendous amount of money. We find that companies are spending out about $250,000 per 100 engineers. And that is an annual charge on maintenance type fees, or these days maybe subscriptions. And if the users aren't using the software appropriately, then that is a heavy thing to carry on the bottom line. It's costing the company a lot of money there. Also, from an audit point of view, financial risk around the actual audits. So these audits, not only is there a huge amount of time lost in gathering the data, so you'll probably want to do an internal one before accepting a voluntary audit, but also if auditors do come in, then you're going to have to chaperone them and give them as much information as you can. So a huge amount of lost time. There is the potential legal fees as well that come with that. These audits aren't free, depends how they come about. So there could be some large legal fees around that. And then finally, of course, the financial settlement. Let's assume that you are non-compliant, and typically a lot of the software is so complex that it's very, very easy for companies to fall out of compliance. There is that kind of big bill at the end with that financial settlement. Let's talk a little about operational risk as well. So, uninformed decision making. Really, if you've got insufficient detail on your license utilization, you've got very little understanding of allocation. Maybe you're not measuring your license ratios. It's going to end in unnecessary spend, and possibly making mistakes that will make you non-compliant as well to these audits. And one of the things here really is, operationally, you're putting yourselves at risk if you're running an older license model. there's a lot of companies out there who have kind of their own negotiated kind of bundles and different software agreements. The administrators that look after these tend to move on. These days people tend to move companies every three to 4 years. That's becoming the new norm. It's very unlikely that somebody comes in, a new administrator comes in and has enough time to go through that kind of legal document in infinite detail to understand some of the information about contractually where they lie, whether it's geographical, training databases and so on. But these, as the administrators and the managers, they need to be aware of the latest vendor licensing models. As soon as you start getting some perpetual licenses mixed in with subscriptions, token-based, named users, maybe a consumption-based model, it puts a lot of mix in, and you need to be on top of that. So you need to be tracking which users are on which of these different license models. Do you need to notify the software vendors when you're moving users between them? Can become a very, very complicated operational risk there. So what can we do to mitigate that? So let's assume that you're going to start working with a SAM methodology. So most big companies out there are using SAM processes, understanding their assets and managing them accordingly. Now, companies in the engineering space might be slightly behind the curve on this. Typically, if you look at some of the media outlets out there, a lot of the engineering type companies are probably just coming into this now. The larger ones have got there, but a lot of the smaller engineering companies are still really developing their asset management methodologies. And, what does it come down to? Well, it's having somebody, a person and a process to understand who's using what, where, when, for these license types. This can be expanded to hardware as well, so tracking which PCs are where, but we're only interested in software licenses here. Understanding who the vendor is, understanding maybe the contract, keeping the contract in one place, and just keeping a good record, as we talked about, with the purchase orders and the receipts around the software that's been purchased. You can also mitigate that by running regular internal audits. So testing your SAM methodology, testing your systems. Have you got all the information that you think an external software audit would need? Can you hold your hand up and say, "Yeah, we're doing this properly"? As part of that, you might want to start consolidating software. It's very easy through merger and acquisition, or different departments having the ability to buy different software. It's very easy to end up with a spread of the software tools that we saw on some of the first slides. Multiple stress analysis, multiple CAD packages, multiple EDA packages. So consolidate as much as you can. It makes it much easier from a software administration, and many of the software tools out there are very, very similar these days. But also have a strategy. Analyze the use of the software so you can determine the growth or the reduction. Really, what you need to do is be able to kind of have that bigger picture and that data-driven view as to what your license exposure is. SAM maturity. Okay, I put this chart together. What we're really looking at here is, a company may be doing some other SAM activities with their business software, but from an engineering software point of view, we tend to find that companies have very low maturity around how they're managing it. So there's a lot of companies out there that have no idea about the software, the license use for their users. If someone comes and bangs on the desk and says we need more licenses, they go ahead and buy more licenses. But I like to look at kind of, that's a 0. Level 1 is very reactive. There might be some people doing some ad hoc kind of in-house scripts just to see what's being used where and when. Maybe some basic reporting. Secondly, kind of that defined level, that they're doing some more advanced reporting, so maybe they in-house tools, or maybe they've got some kind of commercial script. And they can do some kind of trend analysis, maybe putting a bit of a strategy together. Then kind of that in control level where they're looking at doing chargebacks. They can really understand groups of users, they can understand the cost per user, per license, and maybe they're charging that back to different departments. Then kind of that proactive view of a user dashboard. So they're actually publishing this data to a wider audience, maybe even the users. So the users can actually go ahead, self-administer. If there's a denial, that they can actually just really eke out the best use of the user ratios. And then lastly, that kind of very strategic view. So this is where you have a kind of an integrated SAM or IT asset management tool that just helps you kind of have that complete picture over your license. Now, a little bit about us. We have a product called LAMUM. So not only do we have what is effectively a SAM tool, which is the license asset management tool, we also have the second product, which is integrated with usage monitoring. Now, the first tool is a license assets manager. So we're looking at the inventory, all the vendor information, renewals, expirations, what all the different software is, and a push through to the different license servers. At this stage, we have a database backend, and we have an Apache front end, and we have kind of a secured view, so you have to log in. This is the management administrator side, and we also have a direct access. So this is something that can be shared on the documents on the intranet or with kind of a wider audience. So just before I go to a demo, then I just want to have a look at what we're talking about, just to kind of a recap. So when I talk about engineering software, let's imagine that this is CATIA. So it runs on a license server, DSLS or a LUM, or a lot of other CAD packages use a FlexLM enabled, just like CATIA used to. So SolidWorks, NX, many others, lots of ANSYS products. So we have, that they're each installed on these workstations. They all point to a license server, maybe a single one or maybe multiple. They're requesting a license, and within here you have the license daemon, and the license daemon is looking and saying, okay, do we have enough licenses on the license file? Yes, you do. Okay, you can have it. And constantly there's this traffic saying check in, check out. There's a debug log that stores these check-in, check-outs, and we may have an options file which sorts out entitlement. So you can set up groups that entitles certain groups of users to have certain licenses. Really important document here. If you're not using options files, I highly recommend you look at this. And in actual fact, I have an article on this on LinkedIn. So the LAMUM server sits away from the license server. So we don't install anything on the server or on the clients. We have a separate server, and this runs queries on the license server. So not just FlexLM, but you can see on the right-hand side, we support all of these different kind of derivatives of this kind of FlexLM, FlexNet style licensing system, which is this kind of floating port-at-host license system. So we query this. We store all this kind of this traffic, so we look at the debug log, and we query on a regular basis to see who's using it. We store all this in our MariaDB database, or that kind of SQL database, and we present this kind of front end. So at this stage, I'm going to show you what we do. So I told you we have a web server. So the web server sits here. We log in. Once we log in, we have a number of tabs. So we're looking at this kind of license asset manager across the top. So at this top level, we can see, let's look at all these different licenses we have. So we kind of tend to have the vendor. So like any software asset management tool, the tool, what the software is, what the quantities are, how they're protected, maybe it's cloud, perpetual, if it's something that we're tracking, whether it's a FlexLM, DSLS, where the license server is for it, physical location, kind of our internal tag. That's how we identify it. What the daemon's called. If it's port at host, what the port numbers. What the geographic restriction, purchase type. Now, for each of these, we can set up a new vendor. And we can store all this information, so we can go through, put all this information about them. But if I just show you one that we've done earlier, so let's look at Cadence or Cadence. Okay, we're a direct customer. We don't go through a reseller. We've got a non-disclosure agreement. We're storing a number of our different agreements here, and some information about some agreed discounts, and linking out to other kind of intranet-based files here. We're looking at the addresses, contact details. Certainly in my time, the sales reps changed all the time. So it's great just to have a central location just to keep this information up to date. Then more importantly, kind of a complete view as to the software that you own. So the software products, maybe the purchase orders that you used to buy them, the quantities you have, and again, this kind of further information that we saw, key being the expiry dates. We can also do the amounts as well. So if I just go back, so importantly, you might want to look at expiry dates. Our Cadence maintenance is coming up for renewal, or that was November the 10th. Okay, Adobe, so we're not tracking this, but that's coming up on then. We can store the purchase orders. We talked a lot about these licenses, and this can be filtered, so we can change this and just look at who's responsible. If you're a global company, you might have different software asset managers or different people looking after these servers in different geographic locations. Really important, we talked about WAN, LAN. We can track subscription or perpetual with maintenance. All this can be done within this tool. So we can. This is where we can add the different vendors. We can add the different tool sets that go in. One of the most important things when you have a SAM tool, or if you're looking at audit defense, is reporting. So if you were to run through and want to look at these audits, or do some proactive auditing, is you could make sure that these reports are up to date. Just keep on looking, have a look at my WAN licenses, LAN licenses, things that are expiring, perpetual, renewals, purchase history, and so on. So we keep this up to date. We've got new reports coming in here all the time. Our fantastic customers out there are always asking us to kind of add in more fields, more reports, and we can have a different set. So we can have an administrator, but we can have a number of people that can log in to the software to actually view and run these different reports. Bear with me a second. So that's a little bit about the license asset management, but that's obviously half the story. For us, we also want to be looking from a defense point of view. We want to be looking at the usage monitoring as well. So the tab under usage just shows us, we can have a look at a real-time view as to the licenses in use. So how does this audit defense? Well, using a tool like LAMUM shows us that we have complete control of our licenses. We can see then, out of the 15 licenses in use, this is a live view as to real users on the system. We can see, okay, these are the users. With Active Directory, we can then see some information about them. We can see the total time in use. So all these columns can be clicked on. So this guy's been using it for pretty much 2 hours. And if we wanted to, we can revoke the license. Maybe he's gone into a meeting. We don't have enough licenses, so we can control these by killing that off. So you saw that I showed you this kind of gas gauge view. So this is something that people can have on intranet dashboards or even up on a screen in an office. We have a similar view, this kind of overview. So we have these lovely color-coded charts just to see who's using it. Yeah, okay, 20 uses, 20 licenses, 14 in use. But that's only half the story. So that's the real-time view. What we need for a strategy and understanding for our kind of our audit defense is really understanding user behavior. And we can do that. Let's look at some of these user details. So let me usage. Let's look at history graph then. So we don't just store it against a single license. It can be all the features within these license files as well. So Siemens NX have a number of bundles. So we can look. So we have a historical view. Then let's look at 70 days. So we can see the usage with the peaks and troughs. In fact, we can scale this view as well. So let's look at that, and that allows us just to drag an element in here so we can see in a bit more detail. So we can drag, just get a bit more detail as to who they were. So we see this orange line is that kind of high capacity, 15. We've got an average level here, and so we can really look at the peaks and troughs. But we can see here this trend line, that's pretty level. Maybe it's even going down. If we saw this line heading up over time, then you might want to start looking at more licenses. And we can see here we've got some pie charts looking at the top 10 users for those license features. Really useful for understanding who the primary users are for each of those. Really good for upgrades or training. Maybe there's somebody that you expect who should be here, but isn't in this. So it allows you to do lots of kind of what if question making, really. So under here, because we're storing all the information about every user and the machine they're on per license and per license feature, it allows us again to have a look. So we can see, in the last 7 days, we can see these are all the users that have used that license feature. That total time, number of checkouts. So this relates to those pie charts. But it allows us then to do some very good chargeback percentages as well. So we can say, this obviously adds up to 100. If this was a really expensive add-on CAD license, these tend to be, there's a lot around kind of piping, electrical add-ons. What you could do is you could export this out to Excel, add on a column for costs, and you can calculate and do that chargeback. It's very difficult for us to put things in here around cost because there are different cost models, subscription, perpetual. Companies will have paid different amounts for different licenses. So group details as well. So this allows you to do to run for different groups. So these are just some examples of different groups. So we can do those chargeback percentages there. Concurrency. Well, so concurrency is a really interesting one. So we're looking at the probability that somebody's going to be using these licenses. So we know that we've got 15 licenses, but Monday to Friday, 8 till 5. Most of the time, we've only got 2 people using the licenses, and we have to ask, could we? There's from 4 to 15. They're not utilized very often. Could we save maybe 5 of those licenses and change our working practices somewhat? Would that make a big difference to us? We have a fantastic new tool that we've just put in called Multigraph View. And again, so this Multigraph View allows us to put up to 8 different charts. So we can see these historical views. We can look at a heat map. So when do people use these licenses? These kind of concurrent views, as we talked about, and how many users are using these pieces of software. So I'm doing a pretty quick overview, really, looking at these different tools. We have full-on batch reporting. So for any of these charts that we look at, so let's look at an average use chart. So Monday to Friday. I need to put the time in, don't I? So we can see that on average, people are using this for 1 hour. So we've got a very clever system where we can actually do some long checkout alerts. So we can put some alerts in there that say, okay, warn the users if they've been using it for longer than an hour and 10 minutes. And it's all about trying to get that kind of real great user ratio. And batch files are super quick. We can take all this data out as well to CSV or JSON. Let's just head back to the presentation. So I can show you that we've got some interactive reporting. We've got on-demand batch reporting as well, so which can be sent via weekly, monthly, and quarterly. So we've got that great overview of checkouts, that lovely gas gauge view that a lot of people share across their networks. So lots of historical reporting. So we literally have hundreds of different reports, because if you think about all the different license services you can report against all these different date frames, graphs, tables. So we talked about all these different peaks and troughs. We've got lots of different heat maps that we can do, so denials as well. So we have full denial reporting when we look at the log files. Denials heat maps, concurrent Monday to Friday. One of the most important charts we have is the zero usage. We talked about wasting money. Well, actually, if you did 90 days or 365 days and you found software in here that you had never used, you have to question why you're actually spending the money on that. So lots around user detail reports, group reporting. We talked a little bit about this multi-graph view select. Denials. There's so many different alerts. Batch reporting, super easy. Everything is a URL, and that means that it could be sent out. So if you were to hover over, you can see this URL that comes up, and people can click on that and they go to that immediate real-time view. Now, what's really important to us as a business is data accuracy. There's a lot of companies that use in-house tools, and certainly some that use some other commercial tools. We've found that they're overstating usage by as much as 150%, and that has come about because it's not tracking the check-in, check-out quite properly. It's making assumptions. So we've made some special algorithms to kind of double check everything we do. So in summary, really, we talked a bit about audits and kind of risk mitigation. We obviously have a software product here, LAMUM, and it's a comprehensive inventory tool, so you can use it for SAM. So you could store everything about your contracts, purchases, and just ensure you've got a complete overview from an asset point of view. We also have the full reporting, that usage reporting suite, that kind of gives you that complete holistic overview of where you are and where you stand. Super easy to install. We have customers up and running within an hour. So they simply download. We talk them through how to implement the configuration on the phone. Sometimes they don't even need that. But we do offer full implementation packages should you need to. But ultimately, our proposition here then is that we can save companies roughly 20% on their annual costs by having that complete picture and understanding where their utilization is, or overutilization is as well. We can help cost avoidance. We can help people understand software they're simply not using, where they can trade or get a refund from their end user. And we do that by accurately knowing who's using what, where, and when. So those kind of SAM principles. That helps you to be far better prepared with your vendors and offer that kind of audit defense. Yeah, we're tracking actuals, averages, trends. The zero usage report obviously is really key, but it's all about getting that usage efficiency, making sure that you're getting your usage ratios. Apologies for that. Down to the bare minimum, and tracking those denials.